The huge space station hovered silently above the blue and green planet Kepler 442b. In the dark of space, it looked like a huge crystal palace with tall towers that caught light from faraway stars. Director Thelvan sat at his command console in the main control room. His four eyes quickly moved between several screens that showed data from all over the galaxy. Not a human being was Thelvan. He was a member of a species that looked a little like an octopus. His skin was smooth and purple, and he had 8 flexible tentacles that he used like arms and hands. He had been in charge of galactic emergencies for more than 20 years and thought he had seen it all. But today his tentacles were shaking because he was scared. Another message came through the speakers, full of static and fear. A woman's voice screamed from the colony on Arcturus 7, which is 3 star systems away and is a mining planet. They're breaking through the domes that protect the habitat. Oh no, they're inside. We can't stop them anymore. They're killing everyone. Please, someone help us, the voice said, but then it stopped and was replaced by horrible screams and then just empty static noise. Thelvan hit the console with one of his tentacles in anger. This was the 5th message in the last hour, and each one was worse than the one before it. The Kresh had come out of nowhere. No one thought they would attack like this. The Kresh were like giant praying mantises mixed with ants. They stood about 7 feet tall on their back legs. They had claws that could cut through metal and jaws that were very strong. They also had a hive mind that made them work together perfectly. For hundreds of years they stayed in their own area and mostly kept to themselves. They would sometimes attack a small outpost or steal supplies, but nothing major. The galaxy had learned to leave them alone, and they did the same with everyone else. But something was different. 3 days ago, the Kresh sent thousands of warriors to fully invade Arcturus 7. They came like a wave of claws and teeth, pouring out of tunnels that no one knew were there. There were 12,000 people living in the mining colony, including scientists, workers, and families with kids. Thelvan's scanners now showed that maybe 8,000 people were still alive, and that number was going down every hour. Thelvan had already done everything he could think of. 2 days ago he sent the Velkari warriors, who were the Galactic Council's best fighters. The Velkari were giant reptilian soldiers, each one standing 9 feet tall and carrying plasma rifles that could melt stone. For 300 years they had kept the galaxy peaceful. All species respected them. All species were afraid of them. The Velkari stayed on Arcturus 7 for exactly 4 hours before their leader told them to leave. 4 hours. The reply was short and terrible: too many. Can't fight up close. Every minute warriors are dying. Must retreat or lose whole force. Thelvan had never heard a Velkari commander sound scared before. He then tried to talk things out. The Zen were telepathic negotiators who could read minds and find peaceful ways to end any fight. They were kind and wise beings who thought that talking and understanding could solve any problem. Thelvan sent 12 of their best diplomats to the planet to talk to the Kresh leaders. The Kresh ate them. Not as a war act, they just ate them. Like food. The Zen never got the chance to talk. Thelvan was now alone in his command center, watching the number of people in the colony go down steadily. 7,900. 8,500. Each number meant the end of a life. He couldn't send any more soldiers. No more thoughts. The Council's other military forces were too far away. It would take days or weeks to get there. By tomorrow, everyone on Arcturus 7 would be dead. His tentacles moved over the control panel, which opened the section for restricted files. Most council members didn't even know these records existed because they were classified. Files about dangerous animals. Attempts to get in touch that didn't work. Threats to the safety of the galaxy. And types of life that the council had decided should never be allowed to join the galactic community. He scrolled through the database more and more desperately. There had to be something. Some weapon, some ally they forgot about, or some secret force that could help. His eyes went over dozens of files with red warning signs on them. He then stopped. The Sol system. Type of star, G-class yellow dwarf. Earth is the 3rd planet. The dominant species is humans. One of Thelvan's tentacles shook as he opened the file. He had heard rumors about people, stories that older council members told each other in secret. There were more warning signs on the file than he had ever seen on a single species report. Humanity, a carbon-based bipedal species, he read quickly. Level of intelligence, high. Level of technology, growing. Status, observation only, do not make contact. The report went on to say, people are very unpredictable in how they act. They can show incredible kindness and shocking violence at the same time. Species has lived through many extinction-level events because it is adaptable and doesn't give up. Warning: People do not always react the same way to threats. Likely to get worse. Suggest that you keep an eye on things from a distance. Contact protocols, denied until the species shows more stability. There were reports of incidents attached. 15 years ago, people somehow found a Council observation probe and shot it down with simple rockets. The Council sent a new probe, but humans caught it and sent back a message that said, "We know you're watching. Come say hi or leave us alone." The Council had decided to leave them alone. Thelvan kept reading. People were tribal, violent, and protective of their land. Wars and weapons had almost destroyed their own planet more than once. They had nuclear bombs that could destroy whole cities. They made their own air and water dirty and then they worked hard to clean it up. They were dirty, disorganized, and dangerous. But the file also said something else. People were very, very good at fighting. For as long as we have records, they have been at war with each other. They had come up with thousands of different weapons and plans. They thought about fighting in ways that peaceful species couldn't understand. One observer from the Council wrote, "Humans treat war like an art form. They study it, work on it, and make it better all the time." Recommendation: don't fight with this species in the military. Again, Thelvan looked at the population counter. 6,700. He thought about the kids in those habitat domes, who were hiding while monsters tore down the walls. He thought about how he had to protect the people of the Council, even if it meant breaking all the rules. His tentacle was hovering over the button for communication. This was probably a bad idea. People were violent and hard to predict. They could make things worse. They could even attack the colony on their own. They might ask for payment that is impossible. But everyone else had already failed. He pushed the button and sent a tight beam signal to Earth. At the speed of light, the message would take about 6 minutes to get there. If the humans even got it, if they even cared about aliens they had never met, and if they decided to help instead of ignore it, it would still take them days to get there. It's too late. The only noise in the control room was the hum of machines. Thelvan saw the counter go down. 7,500. He probably just made the worst choice of his life. Then, impossibly, a voice came through the speakers. It had been 20 minutes. The message was short and came in a calm human voice with a hint of excitement. "Received your distress call. We're on our way. We'll be there in 6 hours." Thelvan's 4 eyes got big in surprise. 6 hours? That couldn't happen. It took 12 light years to get to Earth. It would take 3 days for even the fastest Council ships to make that trip. What kinds of engines did these people have? He sent back a confirmation and then sat back, his tentacles coiling up in nervousness. He had just asked the most unpredictable species in the galaxy for help. No matter what happened next, the Galactic Council would never be the same. The proximity alarms went off all over the Galactic Council station 6 hours later. Thelvan jumped up from where he had been watching the situation on Arcturus 7 get worse. The population counter now said that there were 7,200 survivors, and the number was still going down. In his desperation, he had almost forgotten about the message he sent to Earth. 3 huge shapes appeared on the edge of the star system. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel in a flash of blue energy that made the station's sensors go crazy for a second. Thelvan quickly brought up the visual feed on his main screen because he wanted to see what kind of military force Earth had sent. He focused on the picture with his 4 eyes, and then his mandibles started to click together in confusion, which was something his kind did when they were scared or unsure. These ships were not for the military. At least, they didn't look like any military ships he had seen in his years of service on the Council. The best engineers from 100 different worlds made the beautiful Council warships. Their hulls were curved and smooth and they moved through space like fish through water. They shone with polished metal and new alloys. They had designs that were pleasing to the eye because they were symmetrical. They looked like tools that were very accurate and strong. It looked like someone had taken a bunch of construction vehicles, industrial mining equipment, and cargo haulers and welded them all together in a way that didn't make much sense. They were blocky and angular, with sharp edges and flat surfaces. It looked strange because pieces of hull plating were bolted on at strange angles. There were pipes and wires that were not covered on the outside. The metal had scratches and dents on it, which showed that it had been used a lot and fixed poorly. And the guns. The stars showed that the weapons were everywhere. There seemed to be gun turrets, missile pods, or some kind of cannon on every surface of these ships. There were big and small guns, energy weapons, and what looked like old-fashioned ballistic cannons. It was too much, too aggressive, and almost silly. The ships looked more like flying fortresses than real spaceships. Velma, a young female of Thelvan's species who worked as his communication officer, turned to him with her tentacles shaking. "Director, they're calling us." Thelvan said, "Put them through," trying to keep his voice steady. The main view screen flickered and changed to show the inside of a ship's bridge. There wasn't much room and the crew was busy moving around in the background, checking screens and calling out reports to each other. Everything looked like it worked, but it was rough, like a workspace that had been used a lot for a long time. A woman sat in a worn military-style chair in the middle of the screen. Her skin was pale, and her short blonde hair was cut in a practical way that barely touched her collar. A thick scar ran through her left eyebrow, cutting a pale line through her hair. Her blue eyes were cold, and they looked at Thelvan with a calm intensity that made him feel uneasy. He didn't know what the patches and insignia on her dark gray uniform meant. She looked tired but awake, like someone who hadn't slept much but was used to getting things done anyway. She spoke clearly and without an accent in galactic standard. "This is Captain Kate Miller of the Titan Security Fleet." Her voice was professional and direct. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't angry either. "We got your call for help about 6 hours ago. We're here to help you with your problem." The translator implant in Thelvan's head had a little trouble with the words, Titan Security Fleet. He thought that the military on Earth, the Planetary Defense Force, or maybe even a government rescue mission would come to help. "Security for Titans?" he said again, his tentacles moving in a confused way. "I'm sorry, but my translator is having trouble with this idea. You are independent contractors?" Kate nodded and leaned back a little in her chair. A male crew member was checking the weapon systems on a console behind her. "That's right. The Outer Sol system has about 40 asteroid mining operations run by Titan Mining Corporation. We are in charge of security. We deal with claim jumpers, pirates, smugglers, corporate spies and other things like that." Something cold settled in Thelvan's stomach area. He had asked for help, and Earth had sent security guards from businesses. Not soldiers. Not Marines. Not even cops. Security guards who kept thieves away from mining sites. "I see," he said slowly, trying not to let his voice show how upset he was. "Do you have a problem with bugs?" Kate asked in a casual way, as if they were talking about something small instead of a full-scale invasion that had already killed thousands of people. Thelvan got himself together and quickly gave a full explanation of what was going on. He told her about the mining colony on Arcturus 7, which had 12,000 people living there when it first started. He told them about the Kresh invasion that happened 3 days ago, how they came without warning and in numbers that no one expected. He talked about how the Valkyrie warriors had to pull back after 4 hours of brutal fighting at close range. He talked about the Zen diplomats who had died while trying to talk things out. When he told her that only about 8,000 civilians were still alive, trapped in sealed habitat domes while the Kresh tore through the colony's defenses section by section, his voice got quieter. Kate didn't say anything while he was talking. During his explanation, she didn't ask any questions. The number of casualties didn't seem to shock or scare her. She sat there with her hands folded on the armrests of her chair, looking at him with her cold blue eyes. Every now and then, she would nod a little to show she understood what he was saying. It was strange how calm she stayed while he talked about the massacre on Arcturus 7. After Thelvan finished explaining, there was a brief silence. Then Kate asked him 2 questions, but they weren't the ones he thought she would. "How many civilians are still alive right now?" Her voice was still the same, but something in her eyes had changed. Thelvan quickly looked at his monitor. "About 8,000 and going down. Every hour we lose more." Kate nodded once. Then she asked her second question. "What are the rules of engagement?" For a moment, Thelvan's translator had trouble with the phrase before giving context. The rules of engagement said what kinds of weapons and methods were allowed and how much force was allowed. He blinked his 4 eyes in a confused way. I don't get what you're asking." "It's easy," Kate said, and her voice sounded different now, harder. "Are there limits on what we can do to get those people out? Can we do whatever we want, or do we have to follow certain rules?" Thelvan thought about the kids who were hiding in those domes. He thought about how the population counter was going down steadily. He thought about how the Valkyrie warriors, the Council's best soldiers, had to run away in defeat. He made up his mind that he said firmly, "No limits. Do what you have to do. Do whatever it takes to save as many as you can." Kate smiled. There was nothing happy or friendly about the smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been told they could take the safety locks off their guns. It was the smile of a predator who had been given the go-ahead to hunt. Something about that look made Thelvan's skin crawl with instinctive fear, even though he knew this person was supposed to be here to help. "Good," Kate said. "We'll finish this in 2 days. Miller is out." Before Thelvan could respond, the screen went black. He sat there for a moment, staring at the blank screen with his tentacles tightly coiled with stress. "Director, Velma whispered so only he could hear. "Did you see how she smiled when you said there were no limits? And she seemed almost eager when you told her how dangerous the situation was. That was not how someone who is scared or worried would have reacted." Thelvan said quietly as he watched the 3 ugly human ships on his tactical display move into position. They weren't being careful or cautious as they got closer. Like hunters who had seen their prey, they were going straight for Arcturus 7 at full speed. He had called for help from other people because he was out of options and desperate. He was starting to think that he had made a terrible mistake. These weren't soldiers from a well-trained army. These were corporate security guards who looked like they were looking forward to fighting an enemy that had beaten the Council's best warriors in just a few hours. Their ships looked like they were held together with spare parts and hope, but they had enough weapons to start a small war. What kind of species sent security from a mining company to respond to a military distress call? And why did they seem so sure they would win? The 3 human ships got to Arcturus 7 in less than 2 hours, which was faster than Thelvan thought those big ships could go. He watched on his screens as they got closer to the planet. He thought they would go into a standard orbital pattern, maybe send down some drones to scout the area, or even try to talk to the Kresh leadership to demand surrender or at least understand why they were doing what they were doing. The people didn't do any of those things. Their ships, on the other hand, came to a sudden stop about 200 miles above the surface of the planet. Thelvan's sensors saw that all 3 ships' cargo bays were opening at the same time. Then, without any warning or time to get ready, 40 things shot out of the ships and dove straight down to the surface. "What are those?" Velma asked, pointing her tentacles at the screen where the things appeared as bright dots falling through the air. Thelvan made the video feed bigger. "Drop pods. They're sending their troops down in armored pods that can be inserted." He felt his heart sink with disappointment. Only 40 pods? That might be 200 soldiers at most. There are more than 50,000 Kresh warriors down there. The pods screamed through the upper atmosphere, and their heat shields glowed bright orange and red as the air around them turned into plasma. They were falling very quickly, much faster than regular drop pods. There was no slow down or careful approach. The people were falling straight down like meteors, leaving a trail of fire behind them. Thelvan looked at the surface cameras that were still working in the colony. The habitat domes were grouped together in a valley between 2 mountain ranges. Most of the outer domes were already broken, and their clear panels were broken, showing bodies in the debris. The Kresh had made a living carpet of chittering, clicking nightmare creatures around the last domes that were still standing. They were taking their time now, almost toying with the trapped colonists, testing the defenses and looking for weak spots. Then the Kresh saw the pods coming in. The response was quick and scary. Thousands of the insect warriors looked up at the sky and started to swarm toward the area where they were supposed to land. They moved like a black wave of claws and teeth, rushing over buildings and through streets at a terrifying speed. The high-pitched clicks turned into a deafening screech that the audio pickups could barely handle. The drop pods hit the ground in the middle of the main colony plaza, breaking up the paving stones and sending up clouds of dust. The Kresh were already there before the dust had a chance to settle. Thelvan was horrified to see thousands of the creatures coming from all directions to the landing site, climbing over each other in their eagerness to get to the pods. It was like watching bugs swarm over food that had fallen. Velvan whispered next to him, "They're going to be torn apart. We just sent those people to their deaths." Thelvan couldn't say anything. He had watched the Kresh fight. Once they got close enough to use their claws and jaws, nothing could live. The Valkyrie warriors had to learn this the hard way. After that, the pods opened. Unlike on Council drop pods, the hatches didn't open smoothly. They blew up with small bombs flying away and hitting a few Kresh nearby. And what came out of those pods was nothing like any army Thelvan had ever seen before. Most of the humans were only about 6 feet tall, which is shorter than the Valkyrie warriors who were 9 feet tall. But they were big and strong, and their armor was thick and bulky with weapons, tools and ammo pouches attached to it. The armor wasn't smooth or pretty. It was big and useful, with gray and tan paint and scuff marks and dents that showed it had been used a lot before. And the guns. Everyone had more than one weapon. They had rifles on their backs, pistols on their hips, knives on their legs and grenades hanging from their vests. The Council forces didn't use these clean energy weapons. These were rough metal and polymer structures that looked almost like they were made by hand. Ballistic weapons that used chemical explosives to shoot solid projectiles. The first sounds of battle made Thelvan jump. There was a loud roar of gunfire instead of the clean humming of energy weapons. Dozens of rifles fired at once, and the shots were so fast that they sounded like a continuous thunder. Hundreds of spent brass shell casings flew out of the guns and hit the ground. And the strangest thing was that the people were making noise. They were yelling at each other, giving each other warnings and directions. A few of them were laughing. Someone yelled over the radio channel that Thelvan was listening to, "Contact! Bugs at 12 o'clock. I see them, Tommy. Light them up," another voice said, sounding like they were really excited. In about 5 seconds, the people made a tight circle around their landing zone to protect it. They moved quickly and efficiently, each one taking a position and firing right away. The crash hit them like a wave, with hundreds of creatures charging in from all sides, claws out and jaws snapping. The people just stood their ground and kept shooting. Thelvan couldn't believe what he saw. Wave after wave of crash charged the humans' position and were cut down before they could reach the soldiers. When used up close, the ballistic weapons the humans had were deadly. The Kresh's natural armor was no match for the heavy bullets, which dropped the creatures in mid-charge. The humans changed weapons when the Kresh got too close. Shotguns that shot more than one bullet at a time. Grenades that went off with bursts of fire and shrapnel. Some people even used things that looked like flamethrowers to spray burning liquid that stuck to the Kresh and ate them. The sound was amazing. Gunfire, explosions, people yelling, Kresh screeching, and the sound of thousands of shell casings hitting the stone ground all the time. It was a mess, loud, violent, and brutal in a way that council warfare never was. How are they able to do this? Velma asked, looking at the screen. Right there, the Kresh outnumber them by hundreds to one. Thelvan didn't know what to say. He just watched as the humans stayed in their defensive position and didn't give an inch. Someone would move to fill in the gap in their circle every time one appeared. The soldier next to them would fire more when one person needed to reload their weapon. They worked together like pieces of a machine. A wounded Valkyrie warrior named Keldar watched the battle from the edge of the colony, hiding in the ruins of a warehouse that had fallen down. 2 days ago he was part of the council's relief force. Most of his unit had died in a Kresh ambush. He had been hiding here since then, too hurt to fight, and waiting to die when the Kresh finally found him. Now he saw one person break away from the main group and run straight toward him, firing short, controlled bursts from his rifle at the Kresh who tried to stop him. The armor on the human had the name Rodriguez written on the chest plate. The person got to the fallen building and dove through the hole. He rolled to his feet and turned around to shoot at the Kresh that were following him. 3 of the creatures tried to come in after him. Rodriguez shot 2 of them with his rifle and killed the third with a pistol he pulled from his hip faster than Keldar could follow. Then the person saw him. Rodriguez crossed the room in 3 quick steps. He grabbed Keldar by the armor harness with one hand and kept firing his gun with the other. Then he started pulling the much bigger Valkyrie warrior toward the door. "Come on, big guy, let's get you out of here," Rodriguez said, and for some reason he was humming a tune while he did it, as if it were just another day at work. Keldar gasped. You can't," and his translator had a hard time with the human's language. "There are too many. You are outnumbered by 50 to 1, maybe even more." Rodriguez dragged him out of the building and started pulling him toward the defensive line that the other people had set up. He stopped to reload his rifle, but the motion was so smooth and practiced that he hardly slowed down. Then he turned to Keldar and smiled, really smiled, with real amusement in his eyes. Rodriguez said with a smile, "Yeah, poor bugs don't stand a chance." He put the new magazine in his rifle with a metallic click and pulled the charging handle. "You guys don't fight wars very often, do you?" Keldar was too shocked to say anything. This person was pulling him through a battlefield where there were a lot of enemies and they were outnumbered by a huge amount. He acted like the Kresh were the ones in trouble. They got to the human defensive line, and 2 other soldiers grabbed Keldar and pulled him into the middle of the circle. There, a medic was already treating a few colonists who had been hurt and somehow rescued during the chaos. Rodriguez turned back to the fight, got back in line and started shooting again. He was still humming the same song. Thelvan watched the battle from space. The humans had been on the ground for 15 minutes now, and they were not just standing still. In fact, they were pushing the Kresh back meter by meter, gaining ground and freeing civilians who were trapped in nearby buildings. "Winning?" Velma said softly, as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. Thelvan didn't say anything. He was too busy trying to figure out what kind of species would act like this in war. The humans fought as brutally and effectively as the Kresh, but they did so while making jokes and laughing with each other. They were outnumbered, surrounded, and deep in enemy territory, but they didn't show any fear. He thought that maybe calling Earth hadn't been a mistake after all. The fight had been going on for 30 hours straight when things took a turn. Thelvan had been watching from the orbital station with little sleep because he couldn't take his eyes off the screens. The humans had taken control of about half of the colony. They were moving carefully through the destroyed areas and rescuing people from buildings that had fallen down. They had saved more than 2,000 civilians by creating a safe area with medical tents and food supplies. The Kresh kept attacking, but the humans' defenses held strong. Then Thelvan's seismic sensors picked up on something big moving underground. The readings showed that 5 huge things were digging their way up from deep beneath the colony. Each one was about the size of a small spaceship. He was horrified when he saw what was happening with his 4 eyes that he whispered, "No. They're bringing up the queens of battle." Velma turned to him and her tentacles shook. But the queens never leave their deep nests. They haven't come out in more than 200 years. The Kresh must be desperate, Thelvan said in a voice that sounded empty. They're sending their strongest units. He had seen videos of battle queens fighting in the Kresh wars hundreds of years ago. They were like nightmares come to life, standing 30 feet tall and wearing armor that was thicker than the hulls of starships. Their claws could easily tear through concrete that had been reinforced. Their mandibles could easily bite through a Valkyrie warrior. And they were smart, a lot smarter than the average Kresh warrior. They planned attacks with terrifying intelligence. Their armor was the worst part. Battle queens had natural biological armor that had grown over millions of years to protect them from almost everything. The records from the past showed that orbital bombardment hardly hurt them. Weapons that use energy only made them mad. The only way that past civilizations had beaten them was by using huge armies to overwhelm them with numbers and firepower over days of non-stop fighting. There were 40 soldiers on the ground. 40. Thelvan quickly started making plans for the remaining civilians to leave. At least the people had enough time to save a few thousand lives before this became a total disaster. Captain Kate Miller was in charge of a commandeered office building with most of its walls blown out. She was on the ground. She looked at her tactical display and saw 5 huge heat signatures on the screen. They were moving toward the humans from different directions. Her face stayed calm as if she were thinking. Lieutenant Mike Patterson, a tall man with dark skin and gray streaks in his short black hair, stood next to her. He was her second in command and had been working with her for 12 years. He knew her well enough to tell when she was up to something. "Ma'am, we have 5 big contacts coming up," he said. "Based on their size and heat signature, analysis suggests they're battle queens." He kept his voice professional even though the news was bad. Kate nodded and kept looking at the display. She ran her finger along the map to see where the queens were going. They were all heading toward the Central Valley, which was the lowest point in the colony and where most of the habitat domes were still standing. "All units, fall back to Rally Point Zulu," she said into her comm system. Patterson raised an eyebrow, which was about as much emotion as he usually showed. "Are we retreating, ma'am?" Kate corrected him, still looking at the map. "We're moving." After that, she changed the channel on her comm. "What's going on with the engineering team?" A woman's voice came back, sounding a little out of breath. "All charges are set, Captain. We've wired the buildings, packed the entrances to the tunnels, and are ready to blow up the main support columns. We just need the targets in the kill zone." Kate had the same smile as a predator. Thelvan had seen it before. "Then let's give them something to run after. All combat units, start a controlled retreat through the Central Valley. Make it look real. I want those queens to believe they are winning." The human soldiers started to pull back from where they were, shooting as they did. It wasn't a retreat in a hurry. They moved in groups that worked together. One team gave covering fire while the other team fell back, and then they switched roles. But to someone looking in from the outside, it looked like they were being pushed back by a stronger force. The first battle queen came out of a building that had fallen down, and the ground shook. It was huge, and its armored body shone black and dark green in the sun. Its 6 legs were as thick as tree trunks, and each one ended in claws that dug deep grooves in the pavement. Its huge mandibles, which opened and closed with grinding sounds like metal on metal, took up most of its head. 4 eyes, each the size of a dinner plate, looked around the battlefield with alien intelligence. 4 more queens came out from different places and surrounded the valley. They let out loud, screeching roars that shook the air. The noise was so loud that some windows in buildings that had survived the fighting suddenly broke. The Kresh warriors, who were used to fighting, went crazy when they saw their queens on the battlefield. They charged at the humans who were running away with even more anger, their clicking and screeching getting louder and louder. Thelvan watched from space, his heart sinking. "They're being taken over. We need to get rescue ships ready for any people who make it out alive." But something didn't seem right. The people were backing away, but they weren't running. They stayed in formation, kept firing, and even seemed to be picking their path carefully, which led the Kresh forces that were following them deeper into the Central Valley. The battle queens came next, drawn by the sight of prey that was finally showing signs of weakness. Kate watched all 5 queens enter the kill zone through electronic binoculars from her high ground overlooking the valley. The huge creatures were smashing through buildings and ripping up roads, all while focusing on crushing the human forces that looked like they were about to break. She stayed. Having patience was important. All 5 queens had to be in the right place. Her combat teams were still retreating and firing, pushing the crash deeper. Some of the younger soldiers may have thought they were really running away. But the veterans who had worked with Kate before knew better. They had seen her set traps before. "Are we ready for engineering?" Kate asked quietly into her comm captain. "All systems are green. Detonators are ready and waiting." Kate watched as the last queen got into place. Thousands of Kresh warriors had crowded into the valley behind the queens. They were so eager to kill the humans that they were climbing over each other. It was perfect. "Blow it," Kate said simply. Nothing happened for a while. Then the whole valley burst into flames. The explosion started deep underground, where the engineering team had put explosives in the old mining tunnels that ran under the colony. These tunnels had been around for a long time, but most people had forgotten about them. For the last 6 hours, the people had been filling them with all the explosives they could find, as well as several tons of mining charges they found in the colony's supply depot. The ground shook as the tunnels fell apart. After that, the buildings began to blow up. Not just 1 or 2 but dozens of them at once. The combat engineers had set up demolition charges on every building in the valley, making each one a huge bomb. The support columns blew up. The walls fell in. The roofs fell down. The explosion grew and spread like a living thing, a wave of fire and destruction that rolled through the valley and destroyed everything in its path. The noise was so loud that it broke audio sensors. It was a roar that was beyond deafening. The blast wave knocked down buildings that were half a mile away. Thelvan watched in shock from space as the whole central valley turned into a ball of fire that was so bright that his screens had to dim automatically to keep from breaking. He could see the explosion with his own eyes from the station. It was a flash on the surface of the planet that was almost as bright as the sun. The valley was gone when the smoke started to clear a few minutes later. Instead, there was a crater full of rubble and twisted metal that was still glowing red-hot in some places. The buildings were nothing but rubble. The streets looked like they had never been there before. 4 of the battle queens were dead. The powerful explosives had ripped their huge bodies apart. The 5th queen was still alive but not for long. Half of it was buried in rubble, its armor was cracked and leaking fluids, and one of its legs was completely ripped off. It made weak clicking sounds as it tried to move but couldn't get free. Kate walked down into the ruined valley, where her boots crunched on broken chitin shells and concrete. Her soldiers had already set up a perimeter and were looking for survivors among the Kresh. Behind her, teams were coming in with medical supplies. She walked slowly toward the dying battle queen, her hand resting on the pistol at her hip but not drawing it. As she got closer, the huge creature's eyes locked on her. Kate could see some emotion in that alien gaze even though they were from different species. It could have been fear. It could have been respect. It could have been understanding. Kate knelt down in the rubble next to the queen's huge head, putting herself in range of the mandibles, which were still dangerous. She spoke softly into those big alien eyes, knowing that the queen probably couldn't understand what she was saying but might understand how she said it. "We're not the monsters of the galaxy," she said softly. "We're the monsters that the monsters are scared of. Keep that in mind." She got up and typed on her comm unit. "Medical teams, get to work. I want to help anyone who is hurt, no matter what kind of animal they are. That means ours, the council civilians and Kresh. People who give up get medical care and water." "That's a direct order." The Kresh warriors who had survived stood still around the edge of the crater, watching the humans walk through the destruction. They had just seen their strongest units get destroyed in a matter of seconds. They had watched their queens die. Now the people were showing mercy. The Kresh began to drop their weapons one by one. 2 days after the battle was over, Director Thelvan finally left his orbital station and took a shuttle down to Arcturus VII's surface. He had to go to the colony and see it for himself to understand what really happened down here. The shuttle ride was quiet except for the sound of the engines, which gave him time to think about everything he had seen from space. Thelvan stepped out onto ground that was still scarred from battle when the shuttle landed in what used to be the colony's main plaza. The burned buildings looked like broken teeth against the sky. There were craters in the pavement from explosions, and there were patches of dried blood on the ground. This included both red human blood and the greenish fluid that the Kresh used as blood. There was trash everywhere and work crews were slowly cleaning it up. But what made Thelvan stop and stare was the medical camp that had been set up in the middle of all this destruction. There were rows of white tents in the plaza, and inside them he could see medics moving between beds. That by itself wasn't surprising. Who was lying in those beds shocked him. People were taking care of Kresh's wounds. Not just holding them or questioning them. Giving them water, checking their vital signs and treating their injuries. He watched as a young woman with red hair carefully cleaned and bandaged the leg of a Kresh warrior who had been trying to kill everyone in this colony just a few days before. The Kresh clicked nervously but didn't fight back against the treatment. A male medic from Earth was using a translator to show a group of Kresh how to properly care for a wounded limb in another tent. The Kresh were learning how to help their own injured. They paid close attention, and their antennas twitched as they took in the information. The tentacles of Thelvan twisted in confusion. He had been in wars before. He knew how species treated enemies they had caught. Most of the time, it meant prison camps at best and death at worst. Not medical help. Not showing them how to do first aid. He didn't understand why this happened, given everything he knew about how conflicts worked. He heard boots crunching on gravel behind him and turned to see Captain Kate Miller coming up to him. She looked worn out, with dark circles under her eyes and dust on her uniform. She probably hadn't slept well in days. But she walked with the same confident stride, holding a datapad in one hand. Director, she said, Thelvan, and gave him a small nod. Hello and welcome to Arcturus 7. Sorry for the mess. We're still cleaning up. Thelvan said, Captain Miller, trying to keep his voice steady. I came to get a final report on the situation. As they walked through the camp together, Kate pulled up information on her datapad. Colony is safe. We have gotten rid of all the Kresh forces that were hostile and set up a safe perimeter. The final number of civilians saved is 7,200, which is better than we thought it would be. We found survivors in some strange places, like bunkers and sealed rooms where people had been able to hide. She moved to another screen. To be honest, Kresh casualties were high. We think that about 40,000 enemy soldiers were killed in the 3 days of fighting. But we have about 3,000 Kresh prisoners who have given up and are now asking for asylum. Thelvan stopped walking so quickly that his tentacles stiffened. Asylum? Did you say asylum? Kate said, that's right, but she didn't seem to understand why this was so shocking. They took over this colony. Thelvan's voice got louder even though he was trying to stay calm. They killed thousands of innocent people. They ate the diplomats from Zen. And now you're saying they want asylum? Kate's face didn't change as she looked at him with her cold blue eyes. And now they're giving up. The battle is over. They've put down their weapons and are asking for safety and a chance to live in peace. This isn't how wars work. Thelvan said no. There has to be justice for what they did. Kate said firmly, there will be. Those who committed specific war crimes will be found and put on trial. But what about the regular soldiers who were following orders and have now given up? We have given them asylum. When an enemy asks for quarter, it's standard human behavior. Thelvan's heart was racing. You can't just decide that. This is not your colony. You can't let an invading force into your country. There are rules and procedures that the Galactic Council must follow for this, as well as committees that must review it. Kate's face hardened a little, and Thelvan found himself taking an involuntary step back. We did just make that choice, Director. My people died and bled to protect this colony. 3 of my soldiers died down here. Because we won this battle, we have certain rights according to every military tradition that has been around for thousands of years. The enemy has given up to us, not to the Galactic Council. We accept their surrender on our terms. Thelvan started to argue more, but Kate stopped him. Hey, we can talk about who has the legal right to do what later. Let's talk about how much you will pay us for our services right now. I've made an invoice for you. She gave him the datapad. Thelvan took it with one shaking tentacle, happy to talk about something else. At least he knew how to pay, which was something simple. He was ready for a huge bill. Mercenary groups usually charged a lot of money for dangerous jobs like this one. He quickly looked through the document. The cost of fuel for the 3 ships that traveled 12 light years. A breakdown of the ammunition used during the operation by type of weapon and amount. Medical supplies used to treat the injured. Parts that can be used to fix broken equipment. The families of the 3 human soldiers who died in action would get death benefits. Some extra costs for. Thelvan came to a stop. He looked over the numbers again more closely. This couldn't be true. The total was surprisingly reasonable, almost cheap compared to what he thought it would be. It was less than what the Galactic Council had paid the Valkyrie warriors just to show up, and they left after 4 hours. This seems very cheap, Thelvan said slowly, as if he were worried he was missing something. Kate said with a shrug, we're not in this to make money. Titan Corporation pays us well to keep their mining operations safe. This was volunteer work. We did it because people needed help. Thelvan felt a wave of relief. He was worried that this would be hard to explain to the Council Budget Committee, but it was going to be much easier than he had thought. He began to thank Kate, but then he saw that there was an asterisk next to a footnote at the bottom of the page. He scrolled down to see what it said. Payment option B. Instead of money, humanity formally asks to join the Galactic Council with full voting rights and a formal military alliance agreement. Thelvan's eyes got big. All four of them. He read the footnote 3 more times to make sure he understood it. He then looked up at Kate, who was looking at him with the same calm look. Thelvan said in a low voice, "You didn't come here for money." There was no question. Kate looked him in the eye without blinking. "We came because people needed help and no one else could help them." That part is right. But yes, people would like to have a say. We want to be a part of the galactic community in an official way. You know that having us as friends is worth more than the cost of fuel and bullets after seeing what we've done here. Thelvan looked back at the medical tents, where human soldiers were carefully taking care of the Kresh who had been hurt. He thought about the scary efficiency of the human military operation in the battle footage he had seen. He remembered seeing 40 soldiers fight off 50,000 Kresh warriors. He remembered the huge blast that killed 5 battle queens, creatures that had wiped out whole civilizations in the past. He said, "You planned this from the start. This wasn't about money. We had to let you into the council because this was about making humanity look good." Kate shook her head. "We didn't plan any of this. We didn't know you were going to call us. We didn't know that the Kresh would attack this colony. We didn't plan any of it. But yes, we did see an opportunity when you called us for help. We saved those people because it was the right thing to do. But we aren't dumb either. We knew that if we were successful, the rest of the galaxy would have to take humans seriously." She pointed to the ruined colony around her. "Director, you called us because you needed the real monsters. You needed someone who could fight like the Kresh but also act like a civilized race. Someone who could be cruel when they needed to be, but kind when the fighting was over. That's how people are. We can go from peace to war and from mercy to violence faster than any other species you've ever met." Thelvan was quiet for a long time, and his tentacles twisted and untwisted as he thought about everything. Kate was correct. He called Earth because he was in a bad situation and everyone else had let him down. The humans had won where the Council's best warriors had lost. They had saved many lives. They had done it in a way that showed both their ability to fight and their ability to show mercy. It would be scary to have people as enemies. The Galactic Council may have made the smartest choice ever by making them allies. Finally, Thelvan said, "I'll recommend that you be accepted as a member. I can't promise that the whole council will agree, but I think most of them will vote for it after I show them the recordings of what happened here. You've worked hard for your place." Kate shook hands with the person in a sign of agreement. Thelvan looked at it for a second before reaching out with his manipulator tentacle and grabbing her hand. Her grip was strong and warm. "Welcome to the galaxy, Director," Kate said with a small smile. "Next time you need help with something?" That smile got a little bigger and you could see teeth. "First call us. And next time, please give us a little more notice so we can bring more people." Thelvan and Kate went on a tour of the rest of the colony over the next few hours. She showed him where the humans had set up their defenses, talked about their tactical choices, and introduced him to some of the civilians they had rescued, who all praised the human soldiers. Thelvan stood on the shuttle landing pad and watched as human ships got ready to leave as he got ready to go back to his orbital station. The ugly, blocky ships that looked like they were held together with spare parts were taking off one by one, heading back to Earth with the crew that survived. Velma stood next to him, her tentacles drooping because she was so tired. "Director, do you think we made the right choice by calling them?" Thelvan saw the last human ship go up into the sky. "We had no choice. Everyone else failed. But I do think it was the right choice. Those people didn't just save a colony today. What did they do then?" Thelvan said quietly, "They told the galaxy they were coming. The Kresh have been one of the most feared species in known space for thousands of years. Battle queens have wiped out whole civilizations. And in just one afternoon, people killed 5 of them and then gave medical care to the rest. This is going to get around to every species in the galaxy." He turned to go to the shuttle. "The monsters of the universe learned something important today. They found out that they are no longer the only ones at the top of the food chain. A little blue planet called Earth is home to a new top predator in the galaxy." Thelvan looked down at the colony below that was getting better as the shuttle took off and headed toward orbit. People were still working in those white tents, taking care of the injured no matter which side they had fought for. People who worked as engineers were helping fix buildings that had been damaged. Soldiers were teaching Kresh refugees how to live together in peace. The galaxy would never be the same again. It wasn't just a battle that humans had won. They had changed the balance of power between the stars in a big way. Delvan thought this was just the beginning of what these strange, violent, caring and scary people would do. He just hoped the rest of the galaxy was ready for them.